In a survey conducted numerous times at parent lectures and training events by myself, the one frustration of parents that keeps coming to the top of the list is, why don't my kids listen to me? What I've discovered is that a big part of the lack of listening is in the way we ineffectively communicate with our children. My first guest on today's show is going to share some very valuable advice on how we can change those communications techniques so that our kids will listen more. Tara Kennedy-Kline is a certified family and parenting expert, popular radio host, TV personality, and speaker, and is a frequent guest on radio and TV talk shows. She's the author of the book, Stop Raising Einstein, Discover the Unique Brilliance in Your Child and You. She has been dubbed the Queen of Accountability and works with parents every day to guide them through the challenges of parenting with a recognition and understanding of what kids are faced with growing up in today's technology-centric world. Welcome to the show, Tara.
Thank you, Bill. How are you?
Good. I love your book. It's full of tons of tips, and you and I swapped books quite a while ago, so I have plenty of time to read it and reread it.
Absolutely.
And what I want to do is I want to cover a couple of the concepts from the book to share with parents, but first share a little bit about you, what you do. What would you like to share with the audience?
I do a lot of things. One thing that I didn't do real well in the beginning of parenting was communication. So I have a son who's on the autism spectrum. He has Asperger's syndrome. And my husband's an engineer, so he communicates extremely effectively. I have ADD. So the three of us, as well as my 14-year-old son, who is, you know, he's just the light of my life. He makes me laugh all the time. But my husband and my youngest son and myself did not communicate at all. So that's what inspired me to get into learning how to communicate with my family. I'm also a certified dream coach. So I had been taking people through the process of communication and learning how to fulfill their dreams and those sort of things for a really long time, and never did those same things with my own kids. So it was kind of an epiphany one day when I learned how to do that, and then I decided to let the world know what I was doing.
I want to ask the crew, would you throw up the image of her book? Why did you write that book?
Stop Raising Einstein? Because when my son was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, everybody came to me and said, oh, you need to put him in science, you need to put him in math. He's a very intellectual kid. He has a 142 IQ. And what we found was he didn't like those things. Although he had the IQ of an Einstein, he had the personality and the loves of a Mozart or a Picasso. So what I found was I didn't know enough about my own son to guide him in the ways that he needed to be guided, so I could effectively teach him and discipline him and raise him in the way he needed to be raised.
Interesting. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what you wrote about in your book, because I think it's really important for parents to understand this. One is, what is respectful communication?
Respectful communication is when you are actually present for a conversation. It's not just the act of listening, but actually hearing what a person is saying to you. And it's something that we just don't do enough. With my youngest son, he taught me that I wasn't listening to him, because when I went to him in a conversation and he was yelling and screaming and throwing a temper tantrum at me, I got quiet for the first time in a long time, and he called me on it. He said, why are you listening to me? What are you doing? And I said, why wouldn't I listen to you, buddy? And he said, because no one ever listens to me. And what I realized was the people that were screaming the loudest in my home were the ones who didn't felt that they were ever being heard. So we developed a method of communication where we would count to 3 in our heads when we're talking to another person, and after they've said their last word, we say nothing for 3 seconds. We allow them to feel that they're being heard and acknowledged, and we're not planning our next move or our next conversation or our next rebuttal in our head instead of actually hearing what people are saying. And the volume in our house dropped significantly when we learned how to do that.
Isn't that classic? Because I think you're so right. Too many people are thinking about what they're going to say next.
Yes.
And I think some of our audience is agreeing with that, because that's what we're doing. And and our kids can tell. Or even we can tell when you walk into somebody's office and say, and you can tell they're distracted with something else, especially if they're holding their BlackBerry or iPhone or whatever. But our kids can tell, and they say, you don't see me. I always tell parents when I teach my parenting class that when they say, you're not looking, and parents try to argue and go, yes, I am. But physically they're looking, but they're not really seeing the child.
They're not present.
That's a good point. So what other, and I could ask you tons of things here, but I want to ask you, what are some other communication techniques that you can offer parents for effective communication?
There's so many things that we don't do well. I found that I was consistently telling my children things like, you don't really mean that, or you don't really feel that way. And that was creating a lot of conflict in my house because, especially with my son, my autistic son, he's a very literal person. So if he comes to me and he tells me he feels a certain way, for me to come back and contradict him on that just creates a complete explosion in our relationship. And then we'd start fighting with each other on why we're right. And so we had to learn that it's not always about being right. Sometimes it's just about acknowledging that the other person may have a different opinion from us, and that's okay too.
You know, it's interesting that you bring that up because parents, you know, the classic thing is, I wrote about in my book, Love Limits and Lessons, about the fact that when parents, or when children say something like, you know, I hate my brother. And then right away, just like you said, parents go, you do not hate your brother. First of all, because hate carries a very strong connotation for us.
Sure.
But I tell parents, kids don't know what hate is.
No.
And so what I encourage parents to do is, instead of saying, no, you don't hate your brother, or saying nothing, the best thing is that I found is to say, it looks like you're mad at your brother.
Yes.
Because we have every right to be mad at somebody.
Sure.
And parents don't like it when their siblings are mad at each other, the kids are mad at each other, because I want everybody to get along.
Exactly.
But it's so important to say it's okay for you to be mad at your brother. Would you agree?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think it's okay. I have a kind of a unique opinion on that. I think it's okay to say that you don't like someone. I always tell my kids, I will love you till the ends of the earth, but right now I don't like the way you're acting. So I have to be able to say the same thing about his brother or his grandmother or whoever. If that person did something that really hurt you or really made you feel angry or sad, it's okay to say, I don't like that. That made me feel sad or angry. And like you said, just to give them the different language, give them the words that you want them to use instead of saying, don't do that. If you simply say, don't do that, but you don't give them an alternative, they don't know what to do. They're children. They're just learning.
And you know what they're going to do? They're going to go, oh yeah, maybe I'm not going to say that now, but I'm going to say it later.
That's right.
And they just, it becomes like, you know, pent up energy that will come out later on. All right, so
True.
It's interesting. One of your the sections in your book is finding gifts in your mistakes. What's that about?
It's beautiful, actually. My children would come home and they would tell me about the things that went wrong. Or, you know, with Alex, every single day was a pink slip. Every single day I would go to pick him up at school for the first year, and the teacher would say, we have to talk about a behavior. Alex hit someone in line today or whatever. What we would do is, instead of simply saying, you can't do that, we would say, what is something that went wrong today that you would do differently if you could? And what that allowed him to do was, first of all, acknowledge that you get a do-over in life. Right? And the second thing is to play out that scenario in his head and figure out for himself how he can change his own behaviors. Because one of the biggest things we struggle with is self-regulation and self-control and guiding your own actions. And we need to hold kids responsible for their actions, but we also need to teach them that there are alternatives for what you do.
You know, it's that you make a good point. One of the things that kind of bugs me is when kids bring home the frown face. Especially when in preschool, they bring home the frown face, and parents think that they have to punish them for what's done. I tell them, no. You know what? First of all, children have, especially young children, have difficulty connecting something that happened in the preschool all the way hours later at home. And so you're right. You're so right in the fact that we shouldn't punish or chastise them, but talk about it. Say,
sure.
You know, what could you have done differently? And of course, one of the questions parents ask, which doesn't always work well, is when they go, why? Why? Why did you do it? And then a classic response is, I don't know, because they really may not even know.
They don't,
or that's their defense mechanism. I don't know. I'm going to get in trouble if I admit it.
If I give the wrong answer, what's going to happen to me then?
Exactly. All right, so we only got a couple minutes left. What other communication tip would you leave parents with?
Oh gosh, I've given so many.
For example, one of the things that I like you said, is live on purpose.
That's a big topic for a few minutes. Yeah, I think that each one of us is born with a purpose, and each one of us has passions and energy and things that we love that guide us in life. And I don't think that we allow our children to express them enough. So one of the things, and the reason that I wrote the book in a journal format, is so that parents can get to know the things that their children love. Because when we know what they love and we know what they're striving for, it helps us to guide them, even with discipline. You know, my son wants to be a chef. So when he comes home and he says I can't stand math, I don't understand why I have to take this math class and I'm not going to do well in it and whatever, I can say, but do you understand that if you want to be a chef, you have to know how to do math, honey? So has your goal changed? And that's the way we can redirect him. And even with Alex, he has goals that he sets for himself, and we can use those goals to guide him. So when we're communicating with our children and we find out what their dreams and their passions and their goals are, it makes everything about disciplining and talking to them and guiding them so much easier and more fulfilling.
That's great advice. One of the things that I like to suggest to parents that kind of tags onto that is when they ask for something. I want to do that, or I want that. Instead of saying, no, we don't have any money, or no, be realistic, no one will ever be a this or that, I always encourage parents to tell the child to put it in their dream book and to have like a composition book from college because the binding's really durable, and say, go write that in your dream book. It's not for us to judge what our kids want. It's for us to help them dream big so they can achieve their purpose. Listen, I'm gonna ask you to stay on the set. We're gonna do another segment, and we're gonna focus a little bit more on your son and you as a mom of a special needs child, and we'll offer some more communication tips, especially in that arena.
I would love that.
We all understand the importance of communicating effectively with our family, but sometimes we get lazy and find ourselves using too many shortcuts to get our needs met. But having a special needs child makes it mandatory to be at the top of your parenting game by being better organized and clear in your communications with your child. Now, coming up after the break, Tara and I are going to discuss some simple techniques for keeping things efficient when caring for a special needs child. We'll be right back, so don't go away.